Good morning, this is Cheryl and welcome to my channel. We had a snowstorm and my backyard looks like a winter wonderland, and it inspired my next project. So I'm going in the house and this is the project that I made, a snowy evergreen in the spirit of the winter months. So here we are in my art studio and I drew up my idea of a 3D snowy evergreen, and it's going to be done in layers. This is an easy project that a beginner can actually do because it's so very forgiving. So we have 5 layers of boughs for the tree, and they will overlap when we put this together. The only piece that has to fit perfectly is the stem of the tree. So this is the reason why it's very forgiving, because your cutting doesn't have to be perfect, your edges don't have to be perfect, and it measures about, 6 inches, 5 inches, somewhere in there, depending on how it gets put together. And it's very simple. There's only 5 pieces, and we'll cut out these pieces using some stencil material. I use stencil material, but you can use the bottoms of plastic containers to make yours, or even cardstock or cardboard. Using a silver Sharpie on some dark green glass, and this glass has a beautiful texture, and it goes in the one direction, and I want to use this texture to add some snow effects to it. But you can use any stained glass that you have. It's green. And because this is so textured on the front, we need to cut it from the back. So usually you need to flip your pieces over. In this case, it didn't really matter, but I'm doing that because that's the practice. If you're cutting on the back side, you flip your pieces over. So I always like to try to save as much glass as I can and arrange my pieces so that they can be cut, saving the glass. And I use my silver Sharpie to mark out the edges of the pieces, and keeping in mind the grain is going horizontal, so that's the way I want it to go on my boughs of my branches. So I'm cutting that out with the horizontal texture of the glass to be horizontal on my boughs. So you need to mark out every piece, and keep in mind glass usually likes to be cut in straight lines. So I'm putting my pieces in an orderly pattern so that I can plan out how they will be cut. I'm also numbering the pieces so that I know which piece goes where. And now it's set. So first I'm going to cut a straight line and cut the excess off. Then I'm going to cut the pieces apart. Straight line, using my running pliers to break the pieces off, and each piece gets cut out individually. Always planning out my cuts, and now we are in fast mode, and using the grocer pliers I'm chipping off some of the excess material to my silver line. So if your cuts aren't perfect, it's okay. This is an easy project for beginners, so that the pieces don't really have to be absolutely perfect when you're cutting. They can be a little different, and that's okay because it's a tree. And last but not least, we do the stem. And this is the piece that you need to make as tight as you can to fit up with the bottom bough. And you can use any color for the stem. I just used white because I had a piece of white that could be used and not wasted. So now I'm going to use it's my inland grinder, and I'm going to smooth out the edges of my piece first. I'm using rubber gloves to protect my fingers in case there are any shards, because I'm applying a little bit of pressure to the piece. I'm grinding down to so that I don't see my silver lines anymore in spots. The little stem piece has to be fit up perfectly. I want to make sure that fits the bottom bough, and grinding the little edges, rounding them off, and making sure there's nothing sharp. The other thing that the grinding does is it gives sands out the edges of the glass so that it gives some tooth for the foil tape to adhere to. So speeding along through this, we grind each piece, getting ready for the next step, which will be to paint the snow on. Moving along, we have our pieces ready, and this is how they will look stacked. And I'm going to use Pebeo Vitrail Veil White glass paint, number 20. And I'm using a scruffy old Deerfoot brush and just applying the paint where I think the snow would hit the branches. Adding to the texture of the glass. So we pop this in the oven, in your regular household oven, on a cookie sheet, and I turn the oven on. I put the glass in when the oven's cold. I turn the oven on to 350, and you bake it for 40 minutes. And time warp, we're back. The glass has been treated with the paint, and now we are foiling our pieces. You want to make sure your piece is in the center of the foil. Fold your edges over and burnish all your edges. And we will fast forward through the process. And I use my clay tool, my wooden clay tool, to burnish with, because I really like how it works. And smooth down, make sure they're really good in here. Taking out some of the lumps and bumps and making sure everything's nice and smooth. Of course, the front of my piece is very textured, so the foil is going to be textured. The key to successful foiling is to make sure that you place the glass in the center of the tape in a uniform manner. So we have all our pieces ready to put together. You trim up some pieces if you see any little overlaps on your foiling with an X-Acto blade. Okay, let's put these together. So I'm going to apply some flux to all the edges on the top. I'm using 60-40 solder, and I'm going to tin every piece, which is just a light coating of solder and making sure that it's, smoothed around very uniformly and covering my foil edges. Flip them over. Same process. Now I'm wearing a rubber glove to protect my hands because the pieces do get hot, and if you get any solder on your hands, you'll get burnt. So the smallest piece is the most difficult piece, but you want to solder your edges. Keeping your edges horizontal so that the solder stays on your piece until they cool a tiny bit. And try to make my solder nice and uniform. Ready to put them together. So with the stem, I like to put a little bit of extra solder in the corners. And now we're just tacking up the piece to fit. We're overlapping each piece about 1/4 of an inch and just tacking the edges in. And it doesn't have to be perfect because this is a tree. So this is why it's so easy for a beginner to do. So now I'm just kind of building up my tacks, making sure that there was a little extra solder there. I'm going to do the same thing to the back, making sure that there's enough solder to hold the pieces together. Now I'm doing my edges and making sure that the edges are cleaned up, taking some extra solder off and making sure that the joints are solid enough, have enough solder there to hold everything together. Just cleaning up everything, making everything uniform. Now I'm scraping solder off on the bottom edges of each of the pieces. It's not anything to do with structure, but more for the texture of snow on the bottom of the branches. And now we add a tinned 18 gauge copper ring. I put it underneath the tip and I just add a dot of solder on each side. I'm using the handle of the brush to support the ring so that when I solder the other side, it doesn't fall off. And just cleaning up anything that needs to be cleaned up. If you see any bare spots, make sure you cover them. Smooth everything out. And there you have it, a snowy evergreen in 3D form. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share. Thank you.